On tonight's episode, Shia LaBeouf,
Attention spans,
NCIS spoilers,
Bryce's high-fiber diet,
Sam's math-based R&B band, Emotional Quotient,
denazification,
and much, much more.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to Book Reports Podcast. My name is Bryce Diener.
and I'm Sam Tyler.
And our special guest this month is our great friend, Michael Sweigard. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thanks so much. Glad to be here.
We wanted you to be our first guest because you're really the one that inspired us to start a podcast. So, listeners, if you have anyone to blame, it's Mike right here.
Hate mail can be addressed to...
That's right. I hope that we can go through this podcast once a month, create something that people can enjoy. The book I chose for our first episode was the book Holes by Louis Sachar. And it's a book is about a young man named Stanley Yelnats, whose name is a palindrome. Fun little...
Stanley Yelnats.
That's right.
Oddly enough, Louis Sachar is also a palindrome.
If you spell it wrong, yes.
Was this made into a movie?
It was. This was
With Shia LaBeouf.
It was his. It was his movie debut, actually. So this book is about Stanley and how he is framed for a crime he didn't commit. He's sent to a detention camp where they have to dig a hole 5 feet around and 5 feet deep. They're said it's supposed to build character, but you find out later that it's a little bit more than that, and they build a backstory of a western town where there's a buried treasure. But it turns out the real buried treasure is friendship. That's not.
The real buried treasure was Shia LaBeouf.
That's right. The interesting thing about this is, being that it's a kid's book, there are a few plot holes. But
see,
anyway,
saw it.
I got through this book in about 5 days or so. What's interesting about this book, though, there's special to about it for me, is this is the book that got me into reading. My mom was like, "Hey,
This past week?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's
start a podcast.
I just learned to read, and I was maybe about 10 or 11 years old when this book came out. My mom was like, "Hey, why don't you read this? I hear they're going to be making a movie soon about it, so why don't you check it out?" I think it took me probably all summer to read it, but I eventually got through it, and it just created that spark in me, and then I was like, I need to find more books like this, because I was so sick of reading books that school would assign, like Heidi.
Right.
I don't care if you move to the mountains of the Midwest, Heidi. I'm sick of hearing about you and your life.
Your grandpa and your sled and your bratty people and your Shirley Temples and your Britney Spears. I don't get kids.
I don't care. Yeah. But there was something about this book that just created that spark in me. And I was looking at the side here, and it says it costs $6.50.
That's how much your mom loves you.
That's right. But I was thinking, that is not only the best investment that my parents made in me, because I've read so many books since then, but it's also the most expensive $6.50 ever spent, because I've spent hundreds of dollars at this point on books. I mean, I've obviously gotten some good deals, but I think last count I have over 175 books in my personal library.
The first taste is free.
That's right.
Huh.
So you said this was the book that introduced you to a love of reading for the most part?
It really was. It introduced me to boys' books, I think. Either I was introduced earlier to gender-neutral books. I remember like Where the Red Fern Grows, even though that was more boy-centered. It really didn't...
It's a safe book.
Yeah, it really
book,
it didn't interest me. It talked very little about red ferns and where they
growing.
Grow. Yeah.
What was it about this book that really grabbed you?
I think
the
there's just something like really just described the dirtiness of it.
Uh-huh.
How he was like this awkward kid who was able to make friends with other awkward kids, being an awkward kid myself at that age is like something you relate to. I remember I got into the Ripley's Believe It or Not books that are like a foot wide and like a foot.
Right.
They had all the neat pictures in it. They had all these weird facts and like the guys that grew their fingernails several feet long.
Yeah.
And so this book started me jogging. Those books started me running. Kept gobbling up books like Ripley's Believe It or Not. It was Guinness Book of World Records.
Okay, yeah.
And what the real treat was for me this last year, I had a friend at work whose son is about that same age that I was, and I thought, I'm going to pass these on to him. So I gave him all my Ripley's books.
Oh, okay.
Guinness Book of World Records. This is like 2004, so I bet
proselytizing.
All the books all the records are broken by now, but it still had neat pictures. I asked her a week later how we liked the books, and she's like, whenever we go on car rides, he brings the book with him. He's like, Mom, look at this. Look what this guy's created. And I could just like feel that spark inside, and it's like he's going to get that level of reading too.
Huh.
That kind of like warmed my heart that I could provide someone else with that level of reading.
Huh. So the real treasure were the books that came
after. I have a similar story with the Captain Underpants series.
Okay.
Really inspires a love of literacy, that series.
I don't think you ever told him about in 5th grade. Sam and I were in 5th grade together, and we had to create a
Oh,
costume
yeah.
for a book that we had read.
Yes, a book report with costume. And I read one of the Captain Underpants books. They're wonderful.
Okay.
It was Captain Underpants and the Terrible Talking Toilet or something like that. And I was the Turbo Toilet 2000 from the book, which is a giant mechanical toilet that runs around attacking people, eating people, and so on. A photographer for the Daily Item, our local newspaper, showed up, and
now
I
they
got
know where
my...
we live.
Yeah.
Schenectady, New York.
Yeah, some serial killer who just runs around killing people dressed as toilets is going to come to my house later. Boy, what a problem!
Who looks at old library archives?
There's got to be somebody in here wearing a toilet costume. There just got to be.
I'm a serial killer.
I'm a serial killer. Reporter for the Daily Item showed up, and I got my picture in the newspaper dressed as a toilet.
Oddly enough, my photo was in the same paper, but I was being arrested for a meth lab in my locker. No, that's not true at all.
For being a serial killer who killed people dressed as toilets.
Yeah,
sure.
That's how we met. No, that's not true.
What a beautiful story. And now we teach Sunday schools together. Can you believe it?
Well, we have a podcast.
Life changed.
So I just wanted to create the discussion and ask you guys, what was the first word that you could read? No, that's not.
Ham and log, I recall, being about the same time.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty sure.
No, I want to know what book maybe got you into a certain genre, because that's what Holes did that for me. That created that spark and that love of reading inside it. So I was wondering, can you guys think of one that you really enjoy? Or Mike, since you are a father, is there one
that's a good question.
That your child really liked to be read? Or
to that question, I guess the book that I've read most as a father to child has been First Thousand Words in Spanish.
What? What is this?
That is a book?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
is it 1,000 words long?
Yeah.
Or is it just then it's all in English?
Well, the ironic thing is it's full of pictures, so it's more than 1,000 words.
Well, a picture does.
It is.
It's
like
one
different,
picture.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you have to identify all of them. The index is right after. It's on page 3. That's something that we enjoy reading because it's very visual, yet for a toddler to look at. So, like, there's a farm scene, and then on the margins of the page, here's how you would name a pig in Spanish.
Oh.
Or if it's chicken, el pollo. And I remember that one. Yeah, so there's an opportunity to just kind of look and then link it to Spanish books.
What's really nice, too, is about children are a lot better at picking up other languages and learning multiple languages. So if you can teach them young how to speak Spanish and stuff like that, that is a great start. I think she's going to have a better start off than I did, which was, just taco or burrito or Taco Bell.
And your parents are Spanish.
Right. El Diener.
El Diener.
Yeah, that's right.
Bryce De Niro. That's a neat idea. I like books with marginalia in them.
Right,
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, for me, I recently decided to read more nonfiction a couple of years ago. I knew that I found spy fiction interesting, so I thought, well, let's read about real-world spies. And I was at a library sale, and I found a book called Red Heat, and it is a history of the Cold War in the Caribbean. Haiti and Cuba and all these islands together. It's the story of how America and Russia fought a proxy war in these countries. Fidel Castro, some of the crazy voodoo that was done to try to kill John F. Kennedy. Stuff like that. It's full of crazy facts, and it was obvious the writer was having fun writing it, which definitely affects how much fun you can have reading a nonfiction book.
So bringing heat to the Cold War.
Absolutely right. Not to be confused with the Jim Belushi Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Red Heat. It's a totally different
I was about to ask.
Were you?
Because clearly that's what everyone thinks of. Sam, you had mentioned a book that had gotten you into nonfiction with spy books. I see you have a similar type of book with you right now. Did you want to talk about that?
I found a really great book called Skorzeny's Special Missions. Cool thing about this book is it's written by Otto Skorzeny of the title. And what makes this cool is Otto Skorzeny is basically a living Indiana Jones villain. He is known as Hitler's commando, the most dangerous man in Europe, the Nazi James Bond. So this is a very interesting book to get from a very interesting perspective.
Does he yell at someone, "You belong in a museum"? Or Indiana Jones yells, "It belongs in a museum"?
Yeah, no, he's the
So do
opposite.
you, Dr. Jones!
He loves snakes. It's really weird.
I was wondering, is there any connection to Indiana Jones? Did they find Skorzeny and
Oh,
or Bond?
That's a good question.
It's got Nazis in it, so he's absolutely in. Most cool thing Skorzeny did, period, is Skorzeny led the mission which rescued Mussolini when he was held prisoner by the Italian government in a hotel on a mountain.
I had heard about
Yeah,
that.
It was really interesting to hear the logistical side of it, because it's his planning of the operation before he decided, yes, I should go along and be the person who rescues Mussolini. I should probably be that person, yes.
So humble.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing is Skorzeny, if I may read an extract,
Sure.
is talking to the pilot of the airplane they're going to fly Mussolini out in. This airplane is about to take off on an incredibly small field that they've cleared to take off on, and there's really only room for 2 people in the plane. And Skorzeny knows that if he's going to get the credit, he should really be seen disembarking from this plane with Mussolini.
Oh so there's only room for 2 people? Is that including the pilot?
Yes, there's only for the weight of 2 people. Okay? It's to not crash and die. He should really only have 2 people on this plane. So this is how he justifies how he got the pilot to take him on the plane. I had to take him aside for a short but tense discussion. The strength of my arguments convinced him at last. I had indeed considered every aspect of the matter most carefully, and fully realized my heavy responsibility in joining the other 2. But could I possibly justify letting the Duce being Mussolini, go alone with Gerlach? If there was a disaster, all that was left for me was a bullet from my own revolver. Adolf Hitler would never forgive such an end to our venture. As there was no other way of getting the Duce safely to Rome, it was better to share the danger with him, even though my presence added to it. If we failed, the same fate would overtake us all. That's kind of the tone of this book.
He really paints himself as like a necessary hero?
Yes and no. Going into this book, I thought for sure it was going to be a lot of swagger, a lot of obvious painting himself as a better person than he was. And there wasn't as much of that. There were a few times where it's like, okay, Skorzeny, sure, yeah. But for the most part, it was much more honest than I thought it was going to be. The few times when he kind of says things I don't agree with so much tended to be involving, shall we say, race issues and why the Nazis fought the war. There's a couple places in the book where he talks about why can't the Americans and the British people see that we're really fighting against the Russians. And this book was written in the 50s. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain degree of, yes, the communists took over half of Germany, hindsight 50-50, but I don't really think they were honestly fighting this war to fight the Russians. But that was kind of the fun, I think, of this book was, number one, it's Otto Skorzeny. He's a fascinating, wonderful, real-life Indiana Jones villain. 2, it was also interesting to see it from his perspective, whether I agree with it or not. There's stuff about the German war effort that we really don't hear about from the German man's point of view, and he's in a great position to be able to report on this because he got orders from Hitler, so he really has a bird's-eye view of the entire war effort. It's very interesting to see it from his perspective, whether I agree with his perspective completely or not. Have you guys ever read a book where you realize you did not agree with the author's perspective at all? Like, what do you do with that when that happens?
That's a good one.
Personally, for me, I read books that I don't agree with a lot, whether it's racist pulps from the 1930s or books about UFOs and that kind of stuff. Part of the fun of it, honestly, is figuring out when I agree and when I disagree, being able to parse that out and having some discernment over that. I enjoy that personally.
I don't think I've ever had an author where I've completely disagreed with them. Like you were saying, like there's some things that you're like, okay, I'll give you that. Yeah. But there's definitely been a few times I've read a book that I'm just like, I don't think I completely agree with that, or compared to what I want to agree with you there. But I think for the most part, for all the books that I've read, I pretty much agreed with the author.
Okay.
I can think of a time where I read, I forget if it was a book or it was an article. It might have been more like an online excerpt or something like that in the course of study. And I remember reading it and thinking wow, this is drastically different from what I had been exposed to prior to reading it. I was glad in the sense that I think when things have come across my radar that have challenged my thinking, it really helps to self-examine in a healthy way to think about, okay, what's the accuracy of what my own thoughts have been, and how can that change my action for the better, to impact and better the lives of those around me. So
that makes sense. It does make me wonder, though, when you read a book, hopefully you're reading it to learn something new. It's not just, you patting yourself on the back for agreeing with the author.
It reminds me of the phrase, ships are always safest in harbor, but then again, that's not what ships were made for. And so if you only read books that you agree with, you're safe in your thinking, but you're not challenging yourself.
Well, you're not learning.
And they say, calm seas never made good sailors. If I can just keep with my nautical theme of metaphors here. If
Bryce is dressed as an 18th century admiral, by the way, his hat keeps poking me in the eye.
That's a nice beard you got going on.
My three-cornered hat.
Right, yeah.
This beats the Gilligan's Island references we're usually stuck with.
But I think you definitely open up your world of thinking when you read books that challenge your thought that you may not necessarily disagree with, but it's something that can help expand yourself in helping to understand where the other side is coming from.
Interesting.
Also, because it was a book from a perspective that I didn't agree with, I also read about things that I wouldn't know about reading books just from the American and British perspective.
Now, do you think that you read it with a certain cognitive dissonance in that I know this guy's a Nazi ahead of time, so anything he says I got to take with a grain of salt? Or was there actually things that you thought that, hey, I can trust him in this?
I started out that way, absolutely. I definitely started off saying, okay, yeah, Skorzeny, go ahead. Yeah, tell me it's just going to be fun to read whatever you have to say. But the more I read this book, the more it was like, okay, he's not really lying that much. Then it sort of became, okay, I trust at least what he is saying as opposed to what he isn't. And then
so you got Stockholm Syndrome as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah. The best books give you Stockholm Syndrome. That's how you finish some of these book series I've read, I'll tell you that. At the very end of the book, he talks about being in a denazification camp, that whole thing that he had to go through after losing a war, basically. Huh. And that's not something you're going to read about in a book written by an American or an Englishman.
Was this book a part of his denazification process?
That's an interesting thought. Probably not. He actually...
It was homework. He had to write an essay.
How I spent my summer of 1940 to 1945.
the grades at the end of the book. Yes, like if he passed.
Skorzeny needs to work on his handwriting and his people skills.
He keeps writing in German. I can't understand it.
A couple other cool things, actually, I want to talk about that was neat in this book is... There's a couple things that he talked about that I haven't heard of before. One is a guy named Captain Father Sixtus O'Connor. He is a Roman Catholic chaplain who ministered to the guys who were on trial at Nuremberg.
Interesting.
He acted as a spiritual counselor, a confessor, and he ministered to these guys while they were on trial for committing military crimes.
Wow.
Doesn't that seem like an interesting thing to learn about more?
That's a pretty heavy role to fill.
Well, you think about it, there's definitely chaplains that visit people on death row.
Right.
And so, I'm not saying that people on death row have done as much heinous things as, people who have had to go through the Nuremberg trials, especially from the Catholic viewpoint. I think they believe, anyone can be saved. Or for most Christian viewpoints, for that matter, everyone is
coming out as a Calvinist, Bryce.
Everyone is able to be saved, regardless of what they've done. I think maybe if I was Captain Priest
Sixtus. Great first name, right?
Yeah. I think maybe for him he might have been a little nervous, even though I never heard of this guy before a sentence ago. Yeah. Meeting these guys, but I think there's worse things Catholics have faced in this world. So,
but to the degree we vilified the Nazis so much, it's so strange to think of them having anybody come up to them during the Nuremberg trial to help them. Because that was a point in time where we justifiably had to keep pushing them down. It's interesting to think of the regular acts of human kindness that we associate with everywhere else except for the Nazis.
Right.
So did Skorzeny speak with them or go and confess to him?
He says that Father came around and ministered however he could to all the guys, even if they weren't religious.
Wow.
I mean, if he's taking up time in a book that's Skorzeny's special missions to mention this guy, he must have had some sort of help.
Is he still alive?
Skorzeny? No. He died after becoming a spy for the Israeli intelligence force.
Whoa.
I know, right?
Wow.
What a twist.
I know.
Wow.
Skorzeny spent the... supposedly...
Did M. Night Shyamalan
again, supposedly. Skorzeny, after denazification, lived in Ireland, became sort of a member of an Irish community, and just sort of like, yeah, he's that one German guy who lives nearby. Then he started a company which trained revolutionaries and far-right terrorists. And then, if I remember correctly...
he started a company, registered and the country knows
business,
about this.
Yeah, a business that
he has to give out W-2s every January.
Yeah, exactly.
Get your receipts.
Get your receipts.
I need receipts. 2 drink minimum. No.
Here's your per diem. I think it was sometime in the 60s Mossad recruited him as an agent to help him track down other Nazis.
Wow.
Yeah.
How successful?
They're not around anymore. No, I don't know.
The Mossad is, though, so they did something right.
They did pretty well.
Where are they? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned you. Please don't come after me.
Ziva DeVito on NCIS is part of the Mossad. It's okay. They're still around.
She's not on the show.
What? What happened?
Oh, I'm sorry. I ruined it for you.
Spoilers! We have to put a spoiler tag on this episode.
Spoiler!
So that was my book. Mike, did you read anything by a Nazi in this past month?
No, I didn't.
I guess we're done.
All right, so we'll see you next time.
It's another great podcast in the can.
Can you tell us about?
Yeah, sure. I brought a book with me that I'm still getting through called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, and I've just felt compelled, and it's by John C. Maxwell. I felt compelled to get better at my questioning.
Huh.
Because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes like it's easy to find yourself in the context of just simply put conversation, and you're thinking about what you want to say next or ask next, and it's like, man, how can I be a better listener and really get to the heart of a matter? But it's just really challenged me, and so far in the book, it kind of has covered questions that you ask of the people around you on a consistent basis. Like, what are the vital questions to really be digging into? And then on the flip side, like, what are the questions that are healthy for us to ask of ourselves on a consistent basis? I mean, it's challenged my thinking, especially for us in a very digital age. I mean, obviously, like, we're connecting and communicating through Wi-Fi, you know, sound bites and things like that are now being communicated anywhere, essentially, on the globe. In the midst of the busyness, how do we hear what we're thinking and allow our own hearts to be searched, so to speak? So that's kind of where I've been with this book, and I'm still kind of getting through it. But that whole idea of how do I ask better, how do I listen better, and how can that help us forward together better?
So what would be one of the good questions?
Well, that's a great question.
First, you compliment the person. While you were saying that, I mean, I wanted to mention something, but then let's bring the conversation back to me, and so it's against what you just said.
I thought of my question as soon as he started talking. I wasn't listening a bit.
It reminded me of way back when I was in like elementary school. Our principal had once told me that he hates when people just like say, "Hey, how you doing?" and they keep walking past, and like they don't even like wait for the answer. And ever since then, that one conversation has stuck in my head. And you know, when I ask someone, "Hey, how you doing?" I don't want to keep walking.
Yeah, question in
transit. Hey, how you doing? Okay, see you later. Or you know, hey, you just say, "Oh, good," you know, just to get rid of them. Or say, "Hey, how you doing? Good. How you doing?"
Yeah, greetings shouldn't have a Doppler effect attached.
You can really just screw them and say, "Hey, what's new?" And then they say, "Good," because they weren't even listening to the question.
Got you now.
Yeah. So you got one there?
There's a portion in here about just talking about why questions are so important, and John Maxwell talks about like getting together with people each month who teach him. And so these are questions that he would ask of people. A couple of them are, what's the greatest lesson that you have learned? Period. Well, question mark, actually.
Oh, even better.
What's the greatest lesson you have learned? Here's a lesson on grammar.
Period. Yeah.
Right.
Parentheses, period, and parentheses.
What are you learning now is the second. How has failure shaped your life? Who do you know whom I should know? And he says, like, this allows connection just for the sake of, like, how can we just benefit one another? What have you read that I should read? Which is what this podcast is significantly
Take
about.
That, John Maxwell.
Yeah, right, yeah. What have you done that I should do? And how can I add value to you?
So, listeners, we're going to be starting a podcast on each one of these questions. So
I think what have you done that I should do is such a great question.
Well, I have a high fiber diet. It's done wonders.
You'll really love it. It seems to be working out smoothly.
I think, kind of going off this line of asking meaningful questions, I'm not sure if it was a conversation I had with you, like, once, but when you're in a relationship with your significant other, each day they say you only have about 4 minutes of meaningful conversation with your significant other. You know, you guys are playing on your phone, or you're watching television, or you're so busy doing work and other things that the amount of time that actually adds up to, hey, this has a positive or negative impact on our relationship is about 4 minutes in each day. But it's important to sit down with them and say, hey, what was one highlight, one positive of your day today? What was one negative? And then go back to what was another highlight. So you start on a high note, go to, hey, I still care about the things that were crappy. Like, we can't all just live in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood where everyone's singing a song and tying their shoes. But also
singing a song and tying their shoes.
We're changing the name of the podcast.
We are absolutely changing the name of this podcast.
No, but then you also end on a positive note. And I think in psychology they say, you always want to end a therapy session on a positive sign. So that way the person that you're helping counsel is able to leave your session on a positive note and on like thinking like, hey, I've done something good. We didn't just talk about my negativity.
Because then you can make them come again.
That's right. You can keep coming back.
Because you're ending on a happy
Well,
note.
kind of to that end, it makes me think about the statistics that came out a few years ago about the attention span. I think it was of adults. It was at least teenagers. One year they said the attention span was, I'm spitballing because I don't have it in front of me, but it was somewhere around like 15 to 20 seconds. And the next year it reduced to like 8 or 12.
So as they got older, it got less.
Well, yeah, the next year the study happened with maybe
Wait,
the same
kids?
And what it was showing is that the second year that the study happened and the statistic came out was that the attention span was less than that of a goldfish. It makes me think, and I'd be curious to know what you guys, in your experience, have noticed, and how do you avoid the noise to have those meaningful moments? Sometimes it's like, man, it's just same old type thing, and how do you get beyond the routine to really dig in and engage with the things that are lasting? And the things that really and truly make an impact, even if it's in, like you said, Bryce, like a 4-minute window.
That's a great question.
Thanks.
From a good lead.
Good leader.
Okay. Well, I think you're a great leader.
I think Good Leaders Ask Good Questions is the prequel. Just
And
gets
then
better
great
and better
leaders
as it
ask
goes.
excellent questions. Excellent leaders, superb questions. He has a series.
The series
coming
gets
that-
better and better.
John,
and better.
if you're listening,
John Maxwell just
we'd
mills
love to
money.
sit down with you and talk about a franchise.
A good business plan would really help you get this started, John Maxwell. Give you some success.
I don't know if
finally.
you've written any other books or if your name's really out there, John Maxwell.
What was the question again?
He asked us what are ways that we are able to stop
Okay.
and have meaningful conversations. One of the things I have to remind myself of is when everyone is shouting, no one is listening. And that's kind of like something I have to like stop myself, and I have to put myself in their perspective, put myself in their shoes. Why are they so passionate about whatever they're talking about? Or if you're talking to someone who has hurt feelings, why are they coming from a position where they feel offended or hurt? You know, I've heard too, all anger pretty much comes from a place of hurt. And so it takes a big person to look past that anger and try to find out where the hurt comes from. And so often I think Sigmund Freud had the id, the ego, and the superego. And the id says, hey, you can get mad at them, like your childish side, and the ego is kind of like the balance of the superego, and the id, that's kind of like your level-headedness. And like, I need to look past their anger, and I need to find out why they're so upset. And I think that takes maturity, and that's something that, even as an adult, it's not something that signing up for the draft, it's not because you're 18 that doesn't suddenly make you mature. You know, when I turned 18, I did sign up for the draft. It didn't make me officially an adult.
Congratulations, you're an adult now, son.
Yeah.
Go die for your country. So, Bryce, are you saying that if you pay attention to the emotional content of your interactions with other people, you can kind of stretch those minutes out? Or
I'm saying you can kind of understand where they're coming from their perspective, why they're displaying the emotions that they're having. And so it allows you to definitely have those meaningful conversations because you can kind of stop yourself from reacting to their anger. And so you definitely could have like those meaningful 4-minute conversations with another person.
I hear you saying that like empathy and maybe at base level sympathy is a significant part of having a meaningful conversation, as you said, like about putting yourself in other people's shoes and really thinking, well, how would it be to experience fill in the blank?
When you started this conversation with this book, you were saying so many people want to, get their thought in there, and sometimes when you have a conversation with someone, you weren't even listening to what they're saying because you think, oh, I have this response, and I better tell them because my thought is definitely more
let me just cut
important.
you off there, Bryce. That's something I want to say.
My thought is definitely more important than what they're saying. And there's been times I've had to catch myself with doing that.
Sure.
Because I need to listen to them because they have the same thought that their thought is important and they have to get it out.
Right. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I have a question. I just no, totally kidding. Yeah. No, I think you're so right. I mean, like, how do we really engage to dig out? Here comes holes,
Yeah.
How are we really mining out what is in the hearts of those around us?
Do my book next.
What is the true auto Schrodzenzi?
You're close.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, so here's the thread that I hear. Like, so it's how are we digging those holes to find what the treasure is, which is found
that is good.
significantly in relationships. You mentioned maturity, which I think, man, I've been challenged with this. It's like, how often do I, as a follower of Jesus, remember my identity in Christ to think, how is that leading versus my fear, versus my insecurity, versus maybe anger, whatever emotion or circumstantial cause that has led me to where my thoughts are, and maybe even different my emotions. How do I let identity and who I've been designed to be lead me to those holes that I can find treasure out in relationships. Because oftentimes, here's Skorzeny.
Oh, okay.
Like, oftentimes, it can feel as though, if we sit to think about it, that it is somewhat of an inquisitive espionage that we're on.
Mm.
Well, because, like, think about, like, how often does it feel like, man, I'd really love to know what you're thinking. Like,
Oh,
really.
I see. Sure.
And
sure.
then you walk away from a conversation and don't want to, like, force something or whatever.
Mhm.
How much can great questions help us to be incisive so we can circumvent the spy dynamic that it can feel like, to be like, well, no, how are you really thinking? Kind of like what you were saying, Bryce. Like, is you walk by someone, it's like, how's it going? Good. Well, really? You know, like, is it really good? Let's take some time and really dig into that. How are you really doing? You know.
Well, sure.
So, I don't know. Have you
How
experienced
good
that?
is it?
I mean,
No.
I think what you guys are talking about with the maturity and the amount we put in our conversation and our desire to get to the base and actually get to know people.
uh-huh.
I do think that a lot of conversation is very, very meaningless and unnecessary. Which is part of, you know...
This is going to be our last recording.
This is how I'm choosing to end our friendship, Bryce.
Oh, no.
Over the internet.
Live and in color.
The end of Sam Tyler and Bryce's relationship with Don Porto. Anyway.
Musical guy.
MC Hammer.
No way, we got MC.
Wow.
Mike Sweigard fan.
Oh my goodness. Man,
Anyway, enough of that.
can't touch this.
I think that a lot of the conversations that we have are not really probing any deeper than you feel comfortable with.
Mm.
You know, a lot of conversation is about our comfort. We have a lot of our conversations that we have are not designed to get us closer together, but are just sort of shooting the breeze, which is not a bad thing, mind you. But I do think that we have to try to dig deeper in the stuff that we talk about.
Now, do you think, I don't have like a, actually here's the real answer, but like I want to know what your thoughts are.
But you're wrong.
Do you think that people give those short, curt answers of, yeah, I'm good, because they want to put up a wall of emotional security, or do you think it's because people are more either too busy or just don't care enough to probe deeper?
I think it's because they're assuming you don't care.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we've trained ourselves to keep it to this banal, simple conversations, to talk about stuff that isn't quite as impactful, things that keep us at arm's length more often than not, because we assume that each other doesn't care about this stuff.
Right.
Like if I asked you, hey Bryce, how are you doing? It's like, oh man, got this colonoscopy I got to have tomorrow, and you're probably
The
not.
first one
you know,
went wrong. What is that?
They went through my mouth instead by accident. The doctor wasn't very good. You may assume that, yeah, I'm just talking about stuff that is private, that Sam's not interested,
Right.
things that I shouldn't share in public, that this is not how personal I want to be with this person. So I assume that they don't
Right.
care and they'll judge me or they'll look down on me or I'll burden them.
So I think that definitely,
Which is true, by the way. You would absolutely burden me if you were just, no.
I think that goes back to these questions that Mike has here from John Maxwell. What these questions almost convey, it's not the, hey, how you doing, or hey, how's the family? It's It's not like a rock skipping across the surface of the water. It's taking a nice big old boulder and going kaplunk. Like, let's get down there to the bottom. Let's get these deep questions. I think people love to share their opinion. I thought so much that I thought we need to get a podcast out there. I thought we were that great. No, but I think like when you ask those type of questions, I think that definitely does tear down any walls, like personal walls or insecurities that people might have. That, hey, this guy not only cares about me, but he also cares about my opinion, and I have a great opinion.
Yeah, so here are the questions again
Yeah.
that we went through. Number one was, what is the greatest lesson you have learned? By asking this question, I seek their wisdom. Number two, what are you learning now? This question allows me to benefit from their passion. How has failure shaped your life? Number three, this question gives insight into their attitude. Who do you know whom I should know? This allows me to engage and connect with their network, and vice versa. You know, it's not just a one-way street. What have you read that I should read? This question directs my personal growth. What have you done that I should do? This helps me seek new experiences, and how can I add value to you? This shows my gratitude and desire to add value to those around me. But one thing that kind of stuck out here is, with our conversation, what's the emotional quotient, you know, to kind of hijack a term, of where we're at, and how does that help or hurt the quality of a conversation, you know?
Right.
Then another thing is, like, maybe have I planned enough time to hear about the deep things, you know? Because if we're in a rush, like, and you don't have time, it's like, well, let's start there and kind of just look at the schedule.
Right.
And that goes back to, like, is my heart at peace? You know, am I feeling free to hear these things and have, kind of like you mentioned the word maturity earlier, like, am I having the strength and wherewithal to be okay with whatever the response is, you know? It says here, too many people have flatlined mentally. They become stagnant. How do you fight against that? By asking the same question my friend Bill used to ask me. This is a great question. When was the last time you had a good thought for the first time? When was the last time you had a good thought for the first time?
Whenever the last time is I sat down on the toilet. That's where
that
or took a shower.
Yeah.
Good thinking, yeah.
Well, I think that's an interesting question. So the first time we had a good thought the last time.
Well,
the last time we had a good thought for the first time.
Right. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
What a weird question. Okay.
And are you able to remember what it was? No.
Have you ever had a good thought? I'll tell you one I had right now. The new name of my math-based R&B group is Emotional Quotient.
Oh.
By the way, I think that's
You plus me equals love.
us. Yeah. That's our pronoun song. Yeah.
The first album is called The Great Divide.
Oh, there you go.
Let's multiply.
Well, that's a good question.
Don't divide my heart into fractions.
Does make me wonder though, what is a good thought? You know, like what is it trying to get at with that? Yeah.
One thing that I thought that you guys would probably find this fascinating. Well, I would like to, let me back up. I would like to know if you find this fascinating.
Oh, we'll tell you.
He writes about how, like, you only get answers to the questions you ask. He provided a list of what happens when we have profound questions and when we don't.
Mm-hmm.
So here was the list of, without profound questions, what we get are shallow answers, lack of confidence, interesting enough, you know, emotional quotient stuff, poor decision making. We live in a mental fog, we work on low priorities, and have immature processing.
Right.
With profound questions, there are profound answers, life confidence, wise decision-making, crystal clear focus in life, focused on high priorities, and mature processing. So, some things that have challenged my thinking.
Right.
To a certain degree, we're reading books to be able to gain knowledge. And one of the best ways to gain knowledge is to ask a question. I mean, we pick up these books because we have a question. What's this whole thing about? And we'll make a good movie with Shia LaBeouf. Answer, of course, is yes.
I think Skorzeny would make a great
movie. Wouldn't he, though? Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll tell you, there was one part of that whole book that was just like, yeah, this should really be made into a movie. My goodness.
The index.
Yeah, the glossary was really entertaining. But yeah, I mean, we read these books to be able to get information. We read these books to be able to grow and to learn. We get these books because we're asking a question of what's on the inside and how am I going to grow from this. Yeah. But we read these books to be able to grow and to learn. We hope you've been able to grow and learn through this podcast as well. That's right, I'm wrapping up. How's that for a master seg? Thank you for listening. This has been Book Reports Podcast. I've been Sam.
I'm Bryce.
And I'm Mike Sweigard, and just want to say thank you to you guys for having me here. Really looking forward to the success of your podcast.
Mike. Absolutely.
Got anything cool going on lately, Mike, you want to talk about?
In the realm of music, our band, the Michael Sweigard Band, has a single out called Soul and Bone, which just talks a little bit about having depth of relationship and avoiding some of the busy things we talked about earlier. So,
well, too bad this is a book podcast.
So definitely,
all plugs have to be of books.
We can just read the lyrics.
So definitely go out, check that out. You guys are on Facebook. You guys are on
MichaelSweigerBand.com, on iTunes also, and Instagram, all that stuff.
So you guys have no excuse not to go find him. He's all over the place. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for coming, Mike. I've been Sam.
I'm Bryce.
Yeah, he's been Bryce. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm Mike. Thanks so much for having me. I didn't know you wanted me to jump in there. I just
yeah, we end every podcast on an awkward note. That's just how it goes. Yeah,
Try that again.
We're doing just fine.